Dragonflight is almost at the end, but there are some couple patches before us. But for now, the main storyline is concluded. But before we just jump into the conclusion that it's really bad, let's break down why it's really bad. First of all, for the whole duration of Dragonflight, we haven't played World of Warcraft. We have played World of Friendship. I'm sure every one of you noticed. Dragonflight has cartoonish storyline, with only exception being Iridicron, and maybe to some degree Razagate. But everything else is very much cartoon, such as Virak being basically one-dimensional villain. Not to mention the disaster that how they just destroyed factions. Let me explain. I don't have any issue with factions uniting, with cross-faction and so on after Shadowlands. After all, we always manage to unite against a single foe. But with only 5 years of time skip since the beginning of Shadowlands, we couldn't become such partners, let's just say. In Dragonflight, all races are acting as one faction. But that wouldn't be case for such a short time skip between races such as orcs and night elves, undead and worgen, and so on. The whole cinematic is very weird, and the expansion reflects that quite well, in a sense that it doesn't really fit into the whole WoW narrative. If we look just at the ending cinematic, every line feels unnatural. It feels like someone has written the script and it was meant to be said by one character, but they decided that every character just reads one line at a time. I mean, it doesn't feel like this should be the end result. It feels very much like first draft, not end result. We can also compare this ending cinematic to Cataclysm. At the end of the Cataclysm, after we defeated Deathwing, aspects lost their power. They became mortals, and the Age of Mortals has begun. Well, it seems that Age of Mortals has ended and it's again Age of Dragons and maybe Keepers and so on. The only exception from this is that they are not Titan aspects, but aspects of Azeroth, whatever that means into the future. Now, let's jump into results from this cinematic. When it comes to dragons, night elves, Azeroth itself, and the new world tree Amirdrasil. Dragons may have a bigger role into the future, especially in the latest part of the World Soul Saga, because of Titans. They might have some role because of their creators and so on. They could have some talk with them or whatever. I'm not sure, nobody is sure. We can just speculate on it. Night Elves, on the other hand, probably will move out of Kalimdor to their new home in Dragon Isles to Amirdrasil. To me, it sounds weird for all Night Elves to leave Kalimdor, since it was their home since the end of the War of the Ancients, basically, especially Nordrassil and Mount Hyjal, and also zones such as Darkshore and Ashenvale. I doubt every Night Elf will go to Dragon Isles. There will be some that will stay in Kalimdor, but majority will probably move. This cinematic probably is also important to Azeroth. It could have impacted her birth. We have seen something in the War Within cinematic between Thrall and Anduin, but the first sign probably is this. After this, she is waking up and she calls for her champions to help her, defend her, and she may help us into the future. When it comes to Amirdrasil, it will probably be somewhere in Dragon Isles after we defeat Virak. Virak was, as I mentioned before, one-dimensional villain who has nothing special. He's just evil because he wants power. It's not interesting. We had a lot of these lately, such as Jailer and Sylvanas to some degree. Him being corrupted by Shadowflame, I'm not sure how reasonable that is. When I look at Virak, I just imagine Deathwing 2.0, nothing else. With the connection to Firelord and Firelands and him flying over the zones. Yeah, to me it's kind of lame. Now I'd like to compare this ending to other bad endings, such as Warlords, BFA, and Shadowlands. First, we're gonna start with Warlords. The thing is that Warlords at least had some kind of progression, while Dragonflight didn't. We could have guessed what will happen at the end of Dragonflight, that aspects will get their power back, but at the end we couldn't have guessed that Warlords will end with Gromash standing with us against Archimount. After all, it was sudden change because they scrapped a bunch of content, but it's still at least more interesting. It had some shock element to it. BFA, on the other hand, had the most anticlimactic and the most anticipated old god. At the start of BFA, we didn't expect that we will fight Nezot. Nezot was anticipated since Cataclysm, since we get to know him because of that thing. But since he was released, he was the only old god that was released from his prison. And he was only able to corrupt 2 zones in the whole Azara, instead of corrupting everything. I mean, Nezot could have done more, and his end, similar to what happened at the end of Lord of the Rings, didn't help him that much. But to be fair to Nezot, there is one thing that gives him some bonus points, and that is he is still talked about. He is still around us, and we all wish that Shadowlands didn't happen and that we all died at the end of BFA and we are in a dream. And lastly, we have Shadowlands. Well, this ending feels like the expansion should start with this ending, because until the end we didn't know how Zoal was imprisoned. The old Baldi was underwhelming, but that's not entirely his fault. He will be one of the most forgotten characters, hopefully, in the WoW universe, alongside Firak. They are both, in my opinion, underwritten, and they don't feel very much like proper villains. They feel very one-dimensional. They don't stand out between villains such as Illidan, Arthas, Gyrosh, Deathwing, and others. They are miserable. Firak's death was something that will be forgotten. I don't think Firak will be ever mentioned again. Zoal maybe. Zoal will go into the history as a worst villain in WoW universe. That's for sure. That's the one thing that goes for him, but Firak don't. I hope we will return to Warcraft instead of being in Friendcraft or even Peacecraft. Let's return the war back into the game. War Within looks promising, and I hope the whole War Within, after all it has the word war in it, will get us back what we want. If you like the video, please like it, comment, subscribe, and so on, and see you in the next one.